Hi, so now we're going to make the collar. So you take your 4 pieces, right sides together, pin them together. Now, you with a 0.5 1/4 inch seam allowance, you sew around the long bit on both pieces, and then you're going to trim your seam allowance and you're going to turn the right way out. Use a tool like this to get a nice flat curve, give it a bit of a press. I will tell you that historically pieces slide, you end up with one bit on the other. If that happens and on this edge you've got a bit of a gap, when you come to make it, you're going to use inwards a 0.5 seam allowance. So if it's within that line, don't panic too much. And you're also going to use binding to clean up these edges on the inside of the dress. Obviously if it slips and you've got a piece here and another piece laid on top of it here and it's not at all lined up, then you're probably going to have to unpick it and put it back together again correctly. But if it's within that seam margin, don't panic too much. Little pieces are tricky to sew, especially on a machine. My hand stitching isn't neat enough to do nice Peter Pan collar lines on a Luna dress. So I'm going to go back down to my smaller seam stitch length, not seam allowance, stitch length. Now, I'm going to tell you, so on a sewing machine, when you're putting your piece of fabric in here and you put your needle down, particularly if you're new to sewing, this feed dog here, which when I move my thing, you see how it moves? The action of that pulls the fabric down. So if it's small pieces and it's little, potentially these corners, if you start on the corner, this bit here is going to get pulled down into that bit there and it starts to chew up. So my advice is make sure you've got your 0.5 seam allowance in, but start down a little bit. That way this bit here isn't going to get chewed into the feed dogs and you're going to get a nice clean sewing line. Fingers crossed it doesn't happen, although if it does, it just shows you what does happen. So I am going to go back one. So I nearly did it. So nice and slow, because you're on a curve now. So it's neatness over anything else. So if you press your foot up and just keep turning it. You can see that there. There we go. Now you see we've sewn all the way around. You do exactly the same for the other collar pieces. So now you need to trim your seam allowance. The reason why you're doing this is so you get a nice clean curve. So this is how close I'm going. Just see my stitch lines there. Obviously you want to be careful not to actually snip your stitches, it's all going to come undone. You turn it inside the correct way. Bit bubbly, so I just use this one. And also Another trick I have is to roll the seam. It kind of gives it an opportunity to sit nice and flat. So here you'll see that my two edges aren't perfectly lined up because they do move slightly. See how one's slightly lower than the other, but that cuts in the seam allowance, that's absolutely fine. So then you repeat that for the other collar piece, and then you'll move on to the next bit, which I'll do in a separate video because you've got to explain just one little thing about the dress and where it places and sewing it on. See you in the next one.